Okay. All right. Welcome everybody to Kaballah and Coffee, the Chanukah edition, the Kaballah of Chanukah, with our guest scholar in residence, Rabbi Chanan. We've been enjoying a wonderful Shabbat, Friday night, Shabbos day, and open up your hearts and your minds. Let's get rocking here.
Thank you.
I'm gonna make it a little cooler because we don't schwitz.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. So I understand that you guys just finished a discourse on Chanukah. Is that right? Last week you wrapped it up. So I would love to hear if anybody, just to start to get the conversation going, if there are any thoughts that people had from this discourse, any reflections or interesting ideas that came to mind from learning this. No? Okay.
A lot more going on than it's a process of light circulation. So our kind of feels, wishes, intents go up, source kind of sends us back. Light. That's what the door is actually receiving that. I guess the air, the characters actually needed that relation between air and light. I think they mentioned that the connecting character, the small, sorry, not to be hysterical, but
So good.
that connected character, the only difference between air and light is kind of that space that is.
Yeah. So there's a couple themes we're working with Chanukah, right? The famous themes we have light, right? We have elevation. What are the other themes that we have for Chanukah? There's a couple of questions that always come to mind Chanukah time. Somebody asked yesterday as well, Friday night, I think. Why do we put so much emphasis on Chanukah? Why is this, is it just to combat what the other holidays are going on around the same time period? Yeah, go ahead.
Simulation.
Yeah, assimilation is a theme, right? Our relationship with the Greeks, the Hellenists, the bifurcation amongst the Jewish people. Any other themes that we can think of? Yeah, miracles, right. Right. So they all come together, right? So the miracles sort of begin and end the story, right? There's sort of two narratives going on simultaneously. Right, we talk about the oil. That's the sort of most commonly accepted, the most commonly discussed miracle that we talk about. But there's also the whole war that was all the battle with the Greeks, right? And in fact, the battle with the Greeks ended today. The battle with the Greeks ended today, and then it was only tomorrow or tonight that they had the oil that they began, that they reinitiated, they re-began the service in the temple, right? So let's talk about miracles first. Let's try to understand a little bit about miracles. We know that there are multiple dimensions or multiple planes upon which miracles exist, right? We have in our tradition, we have a lot of different types of miracles. What are the top miracles that we have? We have the splitting of the Red Sea, right? We have the Purim story, we have Chanukah. Each of them have different characteristics, right? So the splitting of the Red Sea, for example, was very overt. It was very top down, right? It was God sort of inserting himself, right? Instead of it being a Purim type of deal. Purim is the other end of that spectrum. Purim is, you read the Megillah on Purim, and it seems like it's just a natural evolution, right? And so Chanukah maybe marries the two, we could think. Right? What's the nature of the miracles on Chanukah? We had the war, and then we also had the oil. So where is the miracle in the oil? Any thoughts?
So it was pure.
It was pure, right? It was.
And it may, I was just thinking that the chambers in the temple, that the chamber of the oil is closer than the chamber of the tsaros, not lepers, but those were the closest to the holy place. And one is tahara. The emphasis of the oil has to be tahara. But saras, in some sense, is a form of tumah, because everything that is corrected through saras is tumah. But the emphasis here maybe is on the heresy within Bnei Yisrael was like a form of saras. It was looking hara against Hashem. And just as on Pesach, we descended almost to the 50th gate. Had we gone one step further, there would have been no chance of renewal. On Chanukah, the opposition to Hashem may have become so strong that we descended to the point where we had only one pure vial left. But that vial would be enough to, over time, transform all of the saras into kedusha.
So we have a lot at play here, right? We have this idea of tuma and tara, right, which we often see translated as purity and impurity, right? But it's not a cleanliness deal; it's a spiritual understanding. Tuma and tara is about potentiality, right? The ultimate tuma, the ultimate what we understand is what we call an impurity, is a corpse, is a dead body, right? The ultimate, it has the most potential. When you put a soul in it, when it's vitalized with a soul, then it's a walking person. When it's lacking that soul, it becomes this source of this impurity, and each one sort of descending in different levels of the potentiality there. And the oil that we're talking about, that you're saying is this one oil, this one cruise, this one little jar that they found. They said the Talmud tells us that it was found underground, it was unearthed, that we're told that this is about our innermost essence, right? What's unique about oil? What are some things that we know about oil that are unique?
Rises to the top.
It rises to the top. Very good. Anything else?
You get it by pressure.
Crushing. Yeah.
Doesn't it never go bad? Doesn't it last forever?
This one.
I'm just thinking, I crude oil from 1975, that would make 100, no, it doesn't go bad. Not with me, it's north, but it's quite.
And it burns silently, right? There are some sources that they when they combust, they're very loud. They make their existence known, right? In Kaballah and Chassidus, we would understand that as the self-expression, as a sort of individuation, right? That the sort of the part of ourselves, our ego that wants to separate us from the collective, separate us from the singularity, make us feel distinct, make us feel separate. The oil, as being the essence of our soul, representing this sort of this most aligned part of ourself, is about the rising to the top. It's about the crushing, right? The Torah tells us that the oil should be kasas lamor, that it has to be crushed, and within Chabad, this idea is famous, and that this was the explanation that the Rabbi gave on this idea was the last edited mimer, the last edited discourse that we have from the Rabbi. And the Rabbi really emphasizes in its connection to Mesiras Nefesh, to this idea of self-sacrifice. Self-sacrifice is a term that we use pretty often, and I think it's sort of, it sounds very scary. It sounds, when we really meditate on the intensity of it. And I don't think it's necessarily, I think we have to do some digging to understand its relevance to us. We talk about Chanukah as being a holiday of self-sacrifice. Purim as well, the other rabbinic holiday, is one of self-sacrifice. And in our day-to-day life, we're supposed to reflect on self-sacrifice. We say in the Shema, We say, "V'ahavta es Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavcha, b'chol nafshecha, b'chol me'edecha," that our love, our commitment to the relationship with God has to be with all of our heart, with all of our soul, and with all of our ma'od, all of our might. The Talmud understands that to mean our money, but it can also mean, in a more Kabbalistic sense, can mean the stuff of our being, our innermost core. So at what point does self-sacrifice, meditating on self-sacrifice, reflecting on self-sacrifice, what can that teach us? What is the message of Chanukah and self-sacrifice? Where does that come to inform our experience? Any thoughts?
Almost has to hurt to count, right?
Hmm.
Sacrifice. The love can be an intent, and you can have intent in actions, but it really is like, again, if a millionaire gives a buck, that's not.
You got to have skin in the game.
I think service, union service.
Yeah. That's a predominant theme in Hanukkah, right? That's the whole idea of the shamash. That's the whole, the candle that rises above is the one that's serving the other ones. That's the one, that's the essence of what we highlight, right? I think self-sacrifice, one of the things that we can extrapolate, that we can learn from self-sacrifice, is that in a relationship, we all have red lines. We all have these lines in the sand, these deal breakers, these parameters of what it means for us to be in a relationship, right? And there's things that we would, that past it are a no-go, right? That past that, it doesn't, it loses the fidelity in the relationship. I think that when we think about our relationship with God, when we think about what it means to have skin in the game, what it means to show up to our relationship, we can each think of ways that there's the arena, whatever it might be, the dimension in which we would say this is too much. And what can we get from meditating on that? What does that teach us? That we begin to reflect on, if we can make that real for ourselves, we can start to integrate, we can start to reflect on how real our relationship is. The Rabbi mentioned yesterday that fundamentally the revolution of Chassidus is to make God real. Right? How do we make God real? We live in this physical world. We live in a world of fragmentation, a world of concealment, a world where we feel separate from one another. So how do we find that harmony? How do we transcend that? So I think the first thing that we can do is start to reflect on our relationship and start to think, I have my own relationship in my own ways. And in that, in my own personal relationship, just me and God, how do I understand the confines of that relationship, the parameters of that relationship? So we said self-sacrifice. So where do we see the self-sacrifice today in Chanukah? Yeah, go ahead.
Say, in a way, a little bit of sacrifice, but publishing the miracle of the menorah, and just, putting it out there for everybody to see.
We keep ours.
That's not necessarily easy for a lot of people.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I think self-sacrifice is something that you give of yourself
Mm.
in exchange for something else.
Mhm.
I would say sending your kids to Jewish school.
Oh, that's very timely too, right? Hanukkah is about chinuch.
Money, it's a lot of self-sacrifice.
Yeah,
Those
for
other
sure.
things.
For sure. They don't have vouchers here, right? You guys don't have vouchers in Georgia, right?
We have a type of children,
Uh,
it still costs you.
Yeah,
It costs money, but at the end of the day, it's continuing
yeah,
your.
Yeah. Chinuch, education is one of the themes of Hanukkah, right? The word Hanukkah comes from the word chinuch. Chinuch is education. It means also to what's the word? Yes, to dedicate, to induct, maybe. That it's about the restarting the program in the temple that was put on pause, right? That was destroyed. And one of the essences of education when we think about education and when we think about from a Torah standpoint, what education is about, the emphasis is always put on the focus, the purity of it, right? That's the language that's used, the terminology that's used, but really what it means fundamentally is that it's uncompromising. When we think about what we instill into the next generation, we're instilling values that are not to be compromised. They're not to be that there's no this is what we're about, right? I think that was a big part of Chanukah, right? That you had this separation amongst the Jewish people. There were people who said, let's modernize and let's live with the times. Let's learn how to integrate. And the Jews who stood up and said that this is not what we're about, we're saying that we have these lines in the sand, and we have to give up, we have to show up, we have to give ourselves, we have to give of ourselves, right? Let's talk about the public menorah lightings. Are these just when we think back on this idea, right? Pesuma Nisa, the Talmud tells us, publicizing the miracle is an ancient part of the Chanukah experience. In Israel, oftentimes you'll see that in the towns, like the ancient cities, like the old city in Jerusalem or in Sfas, you see they have these courtyards, and everybody will go out and they put the menorahs in these like fish tanks that hang outside their door, and it's reflected outwards, right? What is when we go out into the streets, when we share Chanukah, theoretically it should be just for us, right? Why are we going out and sharing it with everybody else? Why are we making such a big point to say that this is our holiday and this has to be seen by everybody?
Show that we're here.
Mm.
We've survived thousands of years of anti-Semitism.
Mm-hmm. But don't we have an ADL for that?
It's something you do every day.
Mm.
It's not something you do once in a newspaper or something.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's to draw people in that have strayed,
To bring harmony, to bring collectivism.
because people don't know if Chabad exists if they
Mm.
don't see it.
It's not, we don't have the copyright. It's anybody can make a menorah, right?
Right, it's just to draw people in that have
Yeah.
gone astray, maybe.
Right. To share the heritage, right? Yeah. When we think about what it is to stand up and to proclaim this publicly, it's a new phenomenon, right? It's uniquely a Jewish American experience.
It seems new, but also putting it in the window is kind of freaking people from the outside.
Right. There's the picture that goes around every year of the menorah in Nazi Germany overlooking all the Nazi paraphernalia, right? And the flags, the Nazi whatever they're building, right? That even in the darkest of times, we were able to do that. And now all more so, we have 30-foot menorahs that people get up on and Mayor's light, right? So when it comes to the idea of Chanukah and how we can relate to it in our own time, in today's day, I think one of the things that we have to look at, one of the things that we have to reflect on is thinking about what it means to ignite our own lives, to ignite our own passion. The Torah tells us that the entire holiday of Chanukah is peculiar and sort of goes against the grain of all the sort of standard practices that we have, or the sort of commonly accepted understandings that we have relating to our holidays. The time period that we light the menorah is unlike any other time period. It's a unique time period in that we specifically wait for the darkness. We specifically identify a time that there's no longer people around, right? That the day has waned, the light is gone, and it's specifically in the darkness that we choose to illuminate it. It's in a time of the year, it's in the time of the month that we don't typically celebrate anything, right? Usually our holidays, they tend to be either on the first day or on the 15th day, right? That's a pretty common theme, short of Chanukah. Chanukah is a time where we can reflect, where we can explore the areas in our life, the areas in our relationship with our Judaism, our relationship with God, that are otherwise dark, that are otherwise radio silent, right? And we can begin to reflect one candle at a time, with growth and with development, to elevate, to rise up, like we said. The Rabbis teach us that we're meant to listen to the story of the flames. That Kabbalistically, mystically, the flames speak to us and they tell us a story. And that story is that for over 2,000 years, we've been reflecting each year and really each day, trying to bring Chanukah into our life. Chanukah is the story that speaks to our experience, to our Jewish experience in this modern world in some ways more than any other. It began, we recount in the davening that we say during Chanukah. We have a special insert in the Shemona Esrei, in the silent prayer, the silent meditation prayer. We begin Ala Nisim Bala Purkan, reflecting on the miracles that were done in this time. And then we begin to recount a little bit of the history. We say, what was the Greeks' motive? What was the Greeks' intention? They didn't have a problem with the Torah, in some sense. They didn't have a problem with Judaism, in some sense. We're told that they had an issue with it being divine. Their issue with Torah wasn't that you have a code of morals and ethics that you choose to live by. Their issue with Torah was that some of it is nonsensical, some of it is just on tradition, some of it is super rational, and all of it we understand to be divine. And the rabbis tell us that this can in fact teach us how to approach Torah. Do we approach Torah because it makes sense? Do we integrate? Do we activate? Are we active in our Jewish lives because of how it makes us feel? Because it makes sense to us? Or is it because it's our heritage, it's our tradition, and it's the essence of who we are? So the Jews began, the story got kicked off that we were told that the Jews became close with the Greeks. The expression that I saw was that we were fraternizing with the Greeks. And then from there, things just sort of went downhill, right? So how do we understand that in our own lives, right? We live in a modern society. We live in a world where we can walk around and thank God, be proud to be Jewish. I was told this morning that Atlanta is a great place to be Jewish. It certainly seems to me that way, right? So we can walk around and be Jewish. So how do we navigate? I'm sure each one of us has our own relationship with how we do that. How do we navigate what it means to be Jewish in this world? Anybody want to share? If we put the question another way, we started this conversation by saying that there is often a desire to identify Chanukah in its context, in the seasonal context, and to think that maybe we celebrate it and we're so passionate about overt displays of Chanukah celebration because there are other holidays around this time. So what informs our experience as Jews, as Americans? How do we navigate that? What compels us to celebrate Chanukah? What compels us to be outward, to show up on a Sunday and to learn more about Chanukah? Where does that come from? How do we navigate that, between that and living in a modern world of a secular society, of in a country that is not Jewish.
I was gonna say, based on how you started the conversation, we were trying to cut off tradition.
Mm,
So maybe it's a connection to tradition. I suppose, I don't know.
mm,
I think, I really like connecting to tradition and being, I like being proud to be Jewish and when I can sort of share that with friends or like I'm doing Hanukkah with a friend who's not Jewish, whose kids, just to like share that with them. But I do feel like this year, especially because there's been so much anti-Semitism, it's like I have been more careful in the last year about who I say I'm Jewish to,
Mm.
and, not just, I'm more thoughtful about when I say that to people.
yeah,
That's very sad.
it's crazy, right? Yeah, go ahead.
It's a the way I read edification of our connection to Hashem and our reflection.
Mm,
Think about it,
mhm.
especially as the lights of light of God.
More growth, right? Yeah.
The crowd.
Yeah. When we were told that there was a tradition amongst the Chabad rabbis that from the beginning of the month of Elul, which is the last month of the year, until Yud Tes Kislev, the 19th of the month of Kislev, which was just last week, which, as we mentioned, was the liberation of the first Chabad Rebbe and began this sort of new era, this new development in how Chassidus became available to the masses, to the Jewish people at large. We're told that was amongst the Chabad Rebbes, that was seen as one period, one time period. We relate to the high holiday period as being, Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur time. But for the Chabad Rebbes, it began in Elul and it went all the way till last week, which means that as soon as you get out of it, the first thing is Chanukah, right? All the light, all the energy, all the passion that is Tishrei, that is the high holiday period, ends and you're dropped off immediately in the darkest of the time, right? I think when we reflect on the intensity of anti-Semitism as it seems to be rising, right, as it seems to be getting worse, we find ourselves in the Hanukkah time period, right, in that darkness. So how do we navigate that? What is the antidote? What can we do in our own lives? What can we take from Hanukkah? How do we stand strong? How do we rise up?
I invite my neighbors for latkes,
Amazing. I love it.
and they're all, I don't think any of them are Jewish.
Amazing. That's fantastic.
I have Christian friends and I go to a glass fusion. I make things out of glass.
Cool.
And they're all making Christmas ornaments
Uh-huh.
and Christmas trees. I made dreidels
Amazing.
and a tray with the menorah on it.
Oh, wow.
And, I let them know, I explained to them.
Yeah.
And I'm not afraid of anybody knowing that I'm Jewish.
Yeah. Beautiful.
I'm Jewish.
Yeah.
That's what I am.
Yeah.
And when I first moved to Georgia, I wore a Jewish star all the time.
Mhm.
Most of the time I wear it. If anybody has a problem with it, too bad. That's
Yeah.
the way I feel.
Yeah.
And I want to know who doesn't. I wanna know who gets this.
Beautiful. Yeah.
I was gonna say, in some ways, it's gonna sound counterintuitive, what I'm about to say, but in some ways, it also preserves you. You think about it.
Bingo.
When you get cold, you put on your jacket.
Hmm.
So I guess, I don't know. The anti-Semitism, the anti-Jewishness, it sort of makes you look more into your Jewishness. I don't know how to describe it.
A generation ago, 2 generations ago, there were Chassidim in Russia who went to the nth degree. They put their life on the line day in, day out, right? And they did everything that they could to preserve Judaism in Russia in any way possible. And they came to America, and the Rebbe would scream that they gave so much, and now they come to America and it's easy, and we're hanging out now, right? I think there's part of us that we like to go against the grain, right? We like to be countercultural, whatever the culture is. And I think especially as Jews, we like that a lot, right? right? So how do we take that energy? How do we dial into that cruise of oil that's inside of us, that essence that is our desire to rise up, to transcend, to illuminate? How do we dial into that in a way that we can channel it for positivity, that we can take this intense strength that we have as Jewish people and share that outwards?
Point about education, I think, is really important. It's times the fact that we can't really control, but it's very significant. So, I remember, it's certainly changed since then, but when I was, in primary school, we would learn about the world religions and actually celebrate Hanukkah. It was somewhat abbreviated, but that was my familiarity. And then other than that, also, we had kind of a family and spiritual tradition as well, but also knowledge, kind of aligning with So, it does begin with that tradition within families and communities. And, part of that, definitely the public displays and making sure that the fire doesn't go out. But, it does begin with the young ones, frankly. And so kind of building that trust, building familiarity, because, regardless of religion, these kids grow up together with mutual respect for their different spiritualities and traditions, then, they're going to have that strong bond of respect. And if there are sort of people outside of that tribe, it doesn't matter. It's at least you have a strong tribe.
Yeah. So one of the themes that we see in that's identified in Kaballah as connected to Chanukah is the idea in Hebrew called Hodah. Hodah means is often translated as gratitude, and it sort of begins as gratitude, but fundamentally there's a deeper element that goes on there. Hodah, when we say Hodah in Hebrew, is connected with the word Todah, right, which means thanks, right? But on a deeper level, when we look at the real root of the word, it's also used as a word for acknowledgement and almost for a sort of deference. The Talmud will use the word moda, like it'll say that moda Reb Meir l'chachamim, that Rabbi Meir, if Rabbi Meir is having an argument with the chachamim, with the consensus of the rabbis, so if he then capitulates, if he then defers to the rabbi's opinion instead of having his own minority opinion, that's called moida. And this speaks to the core of our spiritual essence. In Kaballah, the terminology that's used is bittul. Bittul is a dangerous word because it often gets mistranslated, and we often get really out of sorts from its mistranslation. But bittul fundamentally is about suspending our sense of self, that tries to keep us disconnected in deference to focusing on our intrinsic connection. I do work in the recovery space. I work with an organization called the Tshuva Center, which is a Jewish AA fellowship program. And there's a famous book in the AA circles called A New Pair of Glasses. It was written by a guy named Chuck C. It's actually a transcription of a talk he gave, and you can actually find the audio. And he was a real character. It's a trip, but A New Pair of Glasses. And in that, he has a diagram, and it's a stick figure, and then a line, and then a circle. And inside the circle, he has written God, life, and good, which he considers to be synonymous. And then he has the line, and the line is the conscious, is the ego's conscious separation, and then is me. And then is the stick figure is me. And what he's saying is that each one of us, we all sit in this world, and we can all convince ourselves, it doesn't take a lot, we can all say that there's the whole universe, there's all y'all, and it ends right here, right? And each one of us can walk around living in that mindset, in that reality. And what is a relationship with God meant to do? It's supposed to delete, it's supposed to melt away that conscious separation. That we can learn how to instead integrate how we can bring that harmony, how we can bring that unity. So this idea of bittul is that same idea. This idea of suspending our sense of self, suspending our what tells us that we're separated from one another, allows us to feel that harmony, to feel that unity. We mentioned yesterday in the shir, in the Chassidus shir in the morning, that the paradox of living in a physical world is that each one of us can sit here and feel like we're separated from one another, because fundamentally, if we're souls and souls are godly, we know Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, God is one. If God is singular and our souls are extensions, expressions of this godly singularity, then we're also totally united. We're also all aligned. And rather, we sit in this world and we feel, because we're in physical bodies, because we are programmed to perceive the fragmentation of this physical world. So we feel the separation. We feel disconnected from one another. Chanukah is a time that we can transcend that. And that's why Chanukah has this message that we try to integrate into our day-to-day life. Right? The message of Chanukah is that we can rise above, that we can transcend. And it's also one of growth, of progression, of transformation. Each day we add a candle. Each day we grow, we put in more effort, we try to do better than yesterday. And each day we reflect on the nature of service. Right? We mentioned before service as being the shamish, the candle that is not part of the candles, but the one that does all the work is the one that's elevated. The one that serves the others is the one that's elevated. The Chanukah candles have a unique and peculiar deal, and that we're told that we're not, and we mentioned this in the liturgy as well, we're told we're not meant to benefit from the candles at all, right? Why? What's their purpose if we're not to benefit from them? Any thoughts?
The holiness.
Mm-hmm. So what does that mean for us? Let's ask a different question. What's holiness? What's holiness all about?
Holiness is about separation.
You
know that?
Yeah.
Because we drink Kaballah and travel to celebrate the week from the day.
Kadosh and Muvdal, the Torah tells us. The Torah says that we should be Kadosh, that we should be what we translate as holy. And the commentaries all say that Kadosh is about Muvdal, is about distinction. Right? What are we distinguishing? What is the act of making a distinction? How does that make something holy?
Separating the divine and mundane, the water, the oil, and different things from each other.
It's about identifying what's aligned, right? Holiness is about alignment. That we can dial into and align with our connection with our source. So the candles being holy, these candles being aligned, what can that teach us? It can tell us that these aren't just to illuminate for mundane use, but this illumination is meant to illuminate inside of us. This illumination is meant to communicate something to us, right? This alignment that we can internalize. This goes back to the idea of listening to the story of the candles. That we can listen to their story, we can hear what they're telling us, we can hear the ways that they're sharing, that they're communicating to us, how we can learn how to be more aligned. Instead of feeling that fragmentation, instead of living in a world where there's disparate forces, we can live in a world of harmony and one of unity. And I think that when we go back to, when we reflect on a deeper level on this idea of why Chanukah has this centrality in our experience, while there's room to say it's, a minor holiday and it's no big deal, and we've just made it out to be this thing because of its proximity to other holidays. We can look at it that we're standing up and we're expressing our pride as Jews in the time of darkness, in a time where it seems like it's difficult to be a Jew. Or we could take it even a step further. And we could say that the reason why Chanukah has its centrality, the reason why it is, top 2, top 3 in the Jewish American experience, is because we all inside of us have a motivation, have a drive, have a desire to be able to stand up and to in the face of the darkness, in the face of other holidays that are going on. Not that we want to be in the conversation, not that we want to be also celebrating holidays at the same time. So we took something minor and elevated it, but it is rather as a response to the world around us. We're able to dial into, we're able to access this core of our being and say that this holiday is in fact the entire manifestation of what it means for us to stand up and be Jewish. Another theme that we're told when it comes to Chanukah, and we mentioned this before, in that everything that applies to Chanukah relates to what the Torah tells us, meaning Chanukah doesn't exist because even though it's a rabbinic holiday and it came after the Torah was written, it doesn't mean it exists in a vacuum, right? So it still dovetails, it still parallels with everything that we know from the Torah. So fundamentally, we have a menorah. We have this Chanukah menorah that has 9 branches, and it's sort of a riff off of the 7-branch menorah that was in the temple, right? But so everything that we know about lighting the menorah is based off of the menorah in the temple. One of the peculiarities of the menorah that was in the temple was that the Kohen who was working in the temple would come to the Beis HaMikdash, would come to the temple in the morning, and he would clean it, and he would fill it up with oil, and he would put new wicks in each of the cups, and then they would walk away and they would close it. And then only until the afternoon, till the day started to end, it was one of the last things that the Kohen did, that the priest did, was he would light it before he left. Doesn't make any sense, right? If the whole point is for the light, then why does it sit unlit the whole day? But at the same time, it's only when it's lit that it gets all schmutzig, that it gets all dirty, right? When he sets it up in the morning, it's sitting in this pristine way. It looks so nice. It's all full, new wicks, it's all shiny, but it's not living up to its purpose. We mentioned before Tuma and Tara, this idea of impurity is about potentiality. So is the purpose of the menorah to be full? Is it to look nice? Or is it to be lit? It would seem that it's to be lit, right? So why do we do it at the end of the day? Why does he do it when no one's around? Why does he close the doors? Any thoughts?
Which doors are you talking about?
So he was in the temple. There was the menorah was right next to, it was right in front of it was in part of near the altar, right? So that whole space was being used during the day. And then it was only towards the tail end of the day that he would actually light it. And then, the day would end and everybody would go home.
Maybe it's like the same thing where you're not supposed to use it for any like purpose. But, you do it just for the holiness.
Yeah. So we know that the windows in the temple actually were sort of situated in a way where they were able to really project light outwards. And that the illumination was not for the internal part, like you're saying. It wasn't just to benefit from the light. It wasn't to illuminate the temple itself, but it was really to illuminate the space around it. There's a story from the early Chabad rabbis that says that Jews are meant to be lamplighters. And the idea of a lamplighter is to be able to take a flame and to go out and ignite, to light up that around him. And the story is it's a very long and involved story that this chassid is asking the Rebbe about being a lamplighter. And he says, and in this place and in that place, and he asks him again and again, and he says, even if it was in the ocean, and he says, yeah, you should go in the ocean, and you should go even underwater and light it there, and even if it's in a desert, and that we push ourselves, that to be a Jew is to go out of our comfort zone, to learn how to transcend our natural limitations, and to go in the place that might not be so comfortable, and to bring light there, to bring positivity there, to bring growth and transformation there. And that's why the Chanukah menorah, 8 being the nights that the light lasted, but also 8 being this idea of transformation. Everything in nature exists in 7s, right? There are 7 notes in a scale. There's 7 days in a week, a musical scale that is, 7 days in a week. 8 is the transcendent. 8 is like this year, for example. This year we mentioned yesterday as well. This year is the year of Hakel. Hakel is a biblical commandment that the Rebbe sort of reintroduced to the Jewish people. The Torah tells us that in the 8th year of the Shemitah cycle, it's a year of unity amongst the Jewish people. It's a year that all the Jewish people would come to Jerusalem and the king would read from the Torah. And it was this really dramatic display of Jewish unity and of Jewish harmony. And we're told that it's the 8th year of the cycle, right? But it's a 7-year cycle. So the 8th year is really the first year. It's like the octave. But 8 is that transformation. 8 is that transcendence. 8 is where we break free of the natural limitations. We mentioned yesterday that we have in our tradition, we have these names of God that each sort of signify, that each sort of highlight different dimensions of the godliness, the way we're able to interact with it, the way we're able to integrate it into our consciousness. So we have this idea of Hashem, of Yud Kei Vav Kei, Haya, Hova, V'Yiyeh, past, present, and future. As we mentioned yesterday, this idea of godliness, the way it transcends, the way it is beyond time and space. We said we went into a very elaborate conversation yesterday about time and space being constructs, being creations of this physical world. But then there's the name Elohim, right? Elohim, the Kabbalists tell us, has the same numerical value as the word for nature. It's the godliness within the nature, the godliness that we can set our clock to. The fact that we built a whole system of time based on the 12 hours of daylight and the 12 hours of nighttime, which is based on the sun rising and setting in the same pattern every day, obviously with seasonal changes. The fact that we can navigate around the world using the stars and a sextant. This is the godliness within the natural order. And Chanukah comes, and Chanukah tells us that in the darkest time, in the time that we don't perceive, that we're not able to live in a reality where that godliness is apparent, where the natural order of the godliness is apparent, in a time of darkness that makes us, that puts us more inside of ourselves, that puts us more, that disconnects us from our surroundings. The intensity, the solitude that darkness creates, the loneliness that it can engender. Comes Chanukah, and we light up the night, and we come specifically when it's darkest. And we stand up proud and we stand up strong as Jews, and we grow and we develop, and each day we try to bring more and more illumination, more vitality to our own lives and to the world around us. And that's why we go out and we share Chanukah in whatever way we can, whether it's making latkes, whether it's making art, And we share that illumination, we share that pride, that vitality we have as Jewish people. We share that to the world around us, because our mission as a people is to be here not for ourselves, is to be here not so we can make sure that there's kugel to eat, but we're here to be here for the people around us. We're here to be here for those around us, for the world around us, that this world should be more bright, it should be more aligned and more illuminated. So happy Chanukah, everybody. Thank you for this conversation. And thank you for having me over this weekend. It's been really great. And yeah, I hope you all enjoy and have a great Chanukah.
Thank you.
Absolutely. The time.
For a few questions, if anybody has questions?
Yeah, for sure.
Before we do, if anybody has questions, just to remind everybody, we have the following Hanukkah celebrations this evening on the corner of St. Charles and North Highland, Virginia Highland, I think it's called 4-5. Yeah, 5 o'clock. Thank you. 5 o'clock there. And there's a silver Hanukkah party here at 6:30. Tuesday night, menorah lighting at 6 p.m. in Atlantic Station. Wednesday at 5:30 at Con City Market. We'll have the mayor of Atlanta participating in the celebration. Thursday night in Decatur on the Decatur Square, as well as later on Thursday night, the young adult Hanukkah party at Park Tavern. And that is our Hanukkah celebrations. Are there any questions, please? No obligations.
No.
Was it Dean Spotted that did the first public?
Yes.
Could you tell that story?
Dina tells us.
Do you want me to tell a story?
Tell the story, I mean,
Doing the
I-
first public meeting.
yeah, so about 1975, like in the summer, the Rebbe had been speaking about getting out in the streets and doing more mitzvahim and just getting people to connect more Jewishly. And my father was sitting with Zev Putterman, who was a friend of his. He was producer for KCAL. He was like an Emmy award-winning producer. He had been, he had a really close friend of my father's. He's no longer alive. And they were just throwing around ideas, and one of them was like to do this shofar in the park, 10 days leading up to Rosh Hashanah in Union Square or in Golden Gate Park, and having celebrities blow the shofar or just different people.
From San Francisco.
Right. So they thought like all the days leading up to Rosh Hashanah, and eventually it would be like, the main day of blowing the shofar. So they'd written this idea into the Rebbe, and the Rebbe's secretary called and said that the Rebbe did not think it was a good idea because it would lessen the excitement, because people would be like, nah, I heard it already in the park. Like it's been done. So they kicked around some more ideas, and my father said, what about doing a menorah lighting? And Zev Putterman actually said, no, that would be terrible. Like Hanukkah is so private. It's something so intimate, and it's like families together at their couch in their homes. And my father showed him in the Talmud how it talks about Persumei Nisa, that this is something we're supposed to be publicizing. And it took a while for Zev, who was a pretty, he was a pretty secular Jew at that time. I mean, always striving and wanting to know more. So they had agreed, and then when Zev got on board, he's like, I know just the person to do this. And he was friends with Bill Graham of the Grateful Dead. And he and Bill Graham had, I guess, Hillsborough West, or he had this maker's factory where he used to make all of these different, things for his concerts. I think he made a VW, a Volkswagen van into like a stretch limo. Like he had done all these crazy fun things. So they asked him if he would do this menorah, and he said he would pay for it, but my father had the right person who had been living at Chabad House to come and actually craft it. And I actually spoke to that person. His name was he was an ex-chassid or a no longer practicing chassid from Borough Park, actually. And I don't think he ever had children. And when I interviewed him, actually, he told me it was his, this was the legacy he left, was building this how tall? Gigantic cherry wood menorah. It's like, and then the story of the menorah, the irony is that it was, that first year they lit it in Union Square, that's like downtown San Francisco. And hundreds of people came out, but the next morning there was like scathing articles about the mixture of church and state and how and the reform rabbi. And my father had gotten like really buy-in from the mayor, from the governor, from different Jewish organizations, and he really had done his due diligence. But this reform rabbi had just written this scathing article, and how dare we, and we shouldn't have any religious symbolism up and take it all down. So the Jewish community of San Francisco, whatever that entity is, just said to my father, like, we need to not do this anymore. And my father was really struggling, and he had spoken to a mentor of his, and he decided that he would agree that the next year they would do it at this mall that a Jew owned and a Jewish man owned, and they would bus everyone in. The Federation promised, we'll get you the same thousands of people, we'll bus everyone in. So my father said, okay, but just make a condition that if I don't get the same amount of people, you will never what's the word, protest or argue this menorah again. So sure enough, the next year they all bust in, and nobody showed up. It was paltry. And so the irony is that in the most liberal city in America, it's never been contested again, this menorah, and every other public menorah has basically been contested all over the United States. And this menorah stays. It's the one menorah that doesn't get
I
contested.
think the actual menorah is the same menorah. till
Yeah.
today.
Yeah.
Yeah. The actual physical menorah is the same one.
And then I had a little treat this year I went to Australia last week, and on our way to Australia, we missed our connecting flight. So we ended up for the day in San Francisco, me and my oldest son, and we drove the hills and we looked at sites. And I said to him, we like own a piece of memorabilia in this city. Like, we have this menorah. It wasn't up yet. We didn't go to Union Square. But then when we landed back in San Francisco, we're walking down the halls and they had this big display of like iconic San Francisco moments, and there was the menorah. It's very special. Hi.